Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our esteemed panelists. I'm really excited to hear about what each of you have to share with us tonight in terms of the topic about how can we sustain the movement and support organizations and change agents. I think now more than ever, there's so much going on. We're all getting pushed and pulled in different ways. And one of the important things about these series that we've been offering is just bringing forth different points of view from important people like yourself who are out on the ground in the community, having your own networks and reach, and listening and hearing from people about what works, what's not working, and also discovering in real time what needs to be thought about as we think about new and emerging organizations and change agents coming out into this sphere, especially with these triple pandemics around health and race and economics and more, right? So what we want to do tonight is we want to just jump right in and get started. We've asked Pastor Marcus Allen from Mt.Zion to lead us off and to get us started with his perspective about how we can support organizations and change agents. And we'll keep moving forward from there. So with that, I want to turn it over to you, Pastor Marcus Allen. And you're on, okay, yep.
Here we go. Good evening, everyone. First off, let me say thank you for the invite. I feel honored and privileged to be a part of such of this great panel. My name is Marcus Allen. At least they call me Reverend Dr. Marcus Allen. I have a doctorate degree in ministry. I grew up in Milwaukee, joined the United States Army. I served 10.5 years in the United States Army, went twice to Iraq and once to Afghanistan. And I got out the Army and started pastoring a church in Virginia. About 5 years later, I came to Madison. I thought Madison was similar to Milwaukee, but it's two totally different worlds. I had only been up here, had been to Madison once when I went to the state capitol when I was in, I think, elementary school. And then I came here to pastor Mt.Zion Baptist Church. Mt.Zion is a 109-year-old church, a predominantly Black church that's been on the south side of Madison since 1960. It used to be downtown, but now we're in the heart of the south side. Speaking from the perspective of nonprofits and faith-based organizations, coming here, one thing that I never considered was seeking funding outside of the church to do ministry within the community. I left the church that I was in to come to a city where I can do ministry work, where I can do work in the community. The church I was pastoring previous was a rural church and a family-based church. So before problems got to me, somebody has already taken care of that problem. But now coming here to Madison is seeing a lot of different issues that I have put my hands on, as far as schools, as far as kids stealing cars. And then this year, we really stepped up our game when COVID-19 happened. We really made that push. We really started doing more work in the community, more than ever before. So we started a movement. Let me say that. We started a movement within our church to be able to reach outside of our walls. And I'm just going to name off some things that we've done. We continue to help people with rent, and we continue our food pantry that has been open throughout the pandemic. We started a classroom in the park where we was teaching 3rd and 4th graders at Penn Park. We just started a school without walls where we're allowing K-5 kids to come to our church. One child living in the community hadn't been online since March, and because of our program, he's now been going to school every day. So we've been doing a lot, and we have really, just looking at this, we have become a movement. Also partner with Marcio at Lighthouse with the African American Council of Churches, and we raised over $430,000 from the, not just primarily within the faith community to help people during COVID-19 areas. So this movement that we are on has allowed us to do this work because the intentionality of the leaders, the influence that we're having, and being able to leverage that influence and do the work, right? Because oftentimes we know if we're in the streets, if we're taking care of people, if we're providing for people, if we're doing what we're supposed to do, that is us doing the work. So a few questions that you all ask: what type of support is vital and instrumental in offering that support? The support you need the most is human capital, right? You need volunteers, because again, we are a church, and we're not one of those churches that has a massive staff. Normally, if you see anything going on in Mount Zion, you're gonna see me out front, because we don't have the staff, the capacity to pay people to be on staff to do that type of community work. So we don't have that. So we need volunteers. We need people to come alongside of us and be willing to support us with tutoring, to support us at our food pantry, to support other organizations in the community. So I think people, oftentimes, organizations, they need funding. Of course you need funding, but if you got funding and you don't got people to work with the funding, the organization is not going to function properly. But I think more than anything, you need people to come along. And let me say this also, far as a faith base, I'm a Baptist preacher, and I grew up, my pastor taught me, don't take money from anyone. All your funds come from tithes and offering. That's from within the membership. But if you're going to do some real ministry work, you need some outside help. You need outside help to come in and give you some funding to help you be able to do these programs. The church is a unique organization. If you look at all other organizations throughout the city, they all have particular focus groups, either women, men, incarcerated men, or men that coming back in, or you have some for single moms. You have mental health agencies, but the church is responsible, and we've committed to focusing on all of these groups, right? We're focusing on single moms or single parents, because there are single dads also. We're focusing on single parents. We focus on marriage. We focus on men, women. We focus on youth, young adult, children. We have to deal with mental health issues and everything. So we have a variety of things that we have to be intentional about. And so we really need people, right? Of course, I'm not going to say we don't need money. We need money to do the work, but we need people to come alongside us to get the work done. And I've been very privileged to be able to take the connections in which I have and develop those connections to something that is continuing to produce greatness here at Mount Zion. A few years ago, I partnered with Myra at Anesis. I met her at Marcio House, and I told her the one thing, the vision I see is having a counseling center in a church. Something that's never happened in this area before, and it's not happening around the country in many areas. So I said, I want to have a counseling center in the church. I told her this. And for me, then that same summer, I went to NAMI, and NAMI said, July is Minority Mental Health Month. So during the month of July, I would call Myra in and say, hey, Myra, would you come in and talk to my people about mental health? She'll come on a Sunday morning, right? That's when we get our largest attendees come on Sunday morning. So I would preach sermons on it. I would teach on mental health issues, depression, anxiety, grief. I'll talk about all of that from a biblical perspective and let people know just because you go to the clinic, just because you go to the church, you can also go to the clinic and you can see your pastor and your psychiatrist also. So I was pushing that, and that was three years ago. And just this year, we received some funding. You hear what I'm saying? We received funding to start this mental health clinic. And once we received the funding, then I got another group came on and said they will renovate a space in the church for the center at no cost to us. So we got Myra. We also we have this other group coming in, partnering with this other group to renovate, and then and now we're able to have a counseling center right in the church. As a matter of fact, I'm sitting in that counseling center right now. And that's because of partnerships. That's because of the intentionality of the leaders. That's because of the influence in the community that we're able to have, and I've been able to have, and you gain that through relationships. Also this summer, after George Floyd happened, I was able to, because of partnerships that I have, because of the reach and the influence, we were able to do a march for justice, and over 10,000 people showed up. And the goal was to get faith people to come out, churches, you know. So one thing I've been pushing is what are our white people's pastors saying from their pulpits when it comes to social justice. And so the goal was that to get church faith-based groups to come together and march together and say the injustices of George Floyd is not acceptable. And we had so many people came out there. We filled State Street up from the start to the end, and it was over. And that was just an incredible moment of us coming together. I got 30 seconds and I'll be done. I'm a Baptist preacher, but main thing I look at is the method in which Jesus lived his life. And I'm not talking about sermonic way, but I'm talking about his leadership. If you're going to be a leader, you got to surround your people with yourself with some good people. He had 12 disciples. And then he had a small group of 3 inner circle, but he also took time by himself to get away for self-care. We can talk about all of this, what we're doing and the great accomplishments that we're doing. And if we're burning ourselves out, if we're doing too much, we're going to say, I quit. And then the mission and the movement cannot go on because the leaders have been involved too much. So I would ask anyone, if you're doing a lot, make sure you take time for yourself. And if you want to support us in any type of way, support Mt.Zion in any type of way, you can contact our church through email at 1mtzlife@gmail.com. We would love for you to partner with us. Again, I accept funding, but definitely we need human capital. Amen. People that'll come along and do the work. God bless.
You know, great way to use all the time and get all the talk points in. Clearly, you have some experience doing this. So kudos to you for demonstrating that leadership. Thank you for that insight. Just to give some context for our listeners, we asked our panelists these types of questions, which were, you know, we recognize that people want to know, how can people support the movements given the work and the effort that it takes to gain momentum? And we asked them to talk about what type of support, give examples of what's been impactful and important in terms of what that support has looked like. We've also asked them to talk about influence, how you can use your own influence or leverage influence that you have. So we gave them an opportunity to come from a couple different perspectives. And so they're really trying to shine a light on, from their experience, what they've learned along the way in their own experiences, and then what they're seeing in real time right now with all the change and disruption that's happened. They're giving us their insight about how to support change, how to support these movements, and what's vital and important, and what kind of steps should you all be thinking about as you make your own decisions about how you want to help and support. So I really appreciate Pastor Allen really kicking us off and giving us some insight to that. Next, we have up, I've already forgot my own order. We have Jerome Dillard, who's going to come forward. He's the state director of EXPO, which stands for Ex-Incarcerated People Organizing. But I'll let him give you some more insight about what he does and how he does it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Annette. And good evening, everyone. As Annette said, my name is Jerome Dillard. I am the state director of Ex-Incarcerated People Organizing, also known as EXPO. We've been around since 2014. I've been working with directly impacted people, individuals coming home from prison, and also individuals inside our walls and fences of our state prisons. Uh, I'm here today and with a heavy heart somewhat because uh, I started fighting for criminal justice reform back in 2005. And here we are today in 2020, and yet still the state of Wisconsin seemed to be immune to any types of criminal justice reform. We've consistently been in the top 3 of the nation in racial disparities in our criminal justice system. I know that's not the only category that we have taken a place in the top 5 in the nation for racial disparities. But today I want to talk about the racial disparities in our criminal justice system and witnessing men and women cycling in and out of our county jails and our prisons for no new charges, predominantly for low-level offenses, and caught up in a vicious cycle of what we call recidivism. I've been blessed in the work that I do to have a relationship with a somewhat relationship with the last 4 secretaries of our Department of Corrections. Blessed to have a relationship with some of our representatives, especially a special one, Representative Stubbs, who I've just watched her come from being a parole officer and to meeting her in her office at the state capitol. I appreciate my sister because she has witnessed this and experienced this firsthand, the injustices that go on in our criminal justice system and community corrections in Wisconsin. We started Expo as a group of us start to get together from around the state and with a statewide organization called Wisdom, a faith-based organization. And we looked at this and said, what would it look like for us to have our own statewide organization? And Expo morphed out of that. Prior to that, I was the director of Voices Beyond Bars here in Madison. I have some work, and my first job doing this work was with Madison Area Urban Ministry, now known as Just Dane, and had the opportunity of even working inside of our county jail as a reentry coordinator, working with the men and women who were cycling in and out of our jails. And that, in my experience, I feel that what happened to George Floyd and often happens with these incidents of police murders. I'll just call it what it is: police murders. One of the first things they want to raise is the background, the criminal history of these individuals, and it makes them less human. And so putting emphasis on how we address or what we call individuals who are in our state prisons or who are under the control of community corrections, language is important. And so I've raised that because what we call people and how we address people has an impact on how people think about themselves and not getting past probably one of the worst decisions they ever made in their life. So we throw out offender, we throw out inmate, we throw out convict, and other terms, derogatory terms to when we talk about system justice impacted people or formerly incarcerated people. So we've begun to put emphasis on that, but not only that, it's what we call deemed crimeless revocations in our state. individuals going back into prison without new crimes. And that is the leader of intake every year for the, I know in 1 year, I knew that over 50% of individuals going into our state prison were going there due to revocations. Still today, and we have roughly 4,000 people every year going into prison under what we call crimeless revocations. Our population has not reduced. It's been lingering around 23,000, 22,000 for the past, since I've been doing this work, the past 15 years, in a system that is designed to hold 17,000 people. This past, a couple of weeks ago, we had an election. In the past few months, all we've heard is get out and vote, get out and vote. You gotta vote, you gotta vote. But we have 54,000 people in our state who are in our communities, who are working, paying taxes, and being taking care of their families, but yet still they cannot cast a ballot because they're on community supervision. I've seen this change in so many states. I had the opportunity and the privilege of being in Florida, working with Florida Rights Restoration, who led the charge in restoring voting rights for the citizens of Florida who had been directly impacted. And that was a state that you lost your voting rights for life for one criminal conviction. Louisiana, if you're a convicted felon, you lose your voting rights for life. Even they have changed. Florida now, you know, you can vote once you're completed with your paper, you're off supervision. Louisiana, you can vote once you've been out 5 years, regardless of if you're on supervision or not. And we're trying to get in line. We're fighting to get in line with most Midwestern states like Illinois, Michigan, Pennsylvania, just to name a few. I'm not going to say Iowa because that's another lifetime ban state. You can never vote in Iowa if you have one felony conviction. And so felony disenfranchisement is one of the key elements that we're addressing here in the state of Wisconsin. We're a growing organization. We're a new 501c3. And I'm glad we have that status. And we launched our Unlock the Vote campaign in 2019. Had some legislation introduced, but it couldn't move anywhere due to our climate and our legislation here in Wisconsin. So if anything, I can ask for support in, and that is, please support us in the Unlock the Vote campaign. You'll be, we have 54,000, again, 54,000 citizens in our state who are in our communities and working, but yet still can't vote. It's an estimated 67,500 who are on supervision in our state, but 54,000 of them can't vote because they have felony convictions. So please get in touch with us. You can reach us on our website, expowisconsin.org, our Facebook page, and we also have a Twitter page. So please reach out to us, support us in our action in getting these voting rights for individuals in the state of Wisconsin reinstated once they're back into the community.
Okay, thank you, Jerome, for that really insightful and helpful status on where things are and how things are looking and where you need the support. We'll be asking all of you as panelists to do a Q&A session. So we'll have an opportunity to circle back and dig in some more to what our panelists have been sharing with us and talking about. Next, I'd like to cue up Mr. Tony Shields, who is with the Wisconsin Philanthropy Network. So really excited to hear what his perspective is from a philanthropy perspective in terms of what does support look like in this time of change. So with that, Tony, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you so much, Annette. I was holding my breath after Pastor Allen spoke and thought to myself, boy, I don't want to follow him up. He's pretty good. And then Mr. Dillard comes along and he lights it up too. So I'm just glad they didn't put me after Representative Stubbs, or else I might have had to walk away over the course of this conversation. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here and the opportunity to share with the Facebook Nation and with this great panel on a fascinating time that's in our lives right now. My name is Tony Shields. Again, I am president and CEO of the Wisconsin Philanthropy Network. WPN is a member organization of philanthropic interest throughout the state of Wisconsin. Our goal is to promote effective philanthropy, and we do that through networking. We do that through providing research about philanthropy from both a national and statewide perspective, and we convene around key issues related to things that are happening in our communities to help inform philanthropy, and with the ultimate goal to help philanthropy in Wisconsin be more efficient in their work. It's a great opportunity for me to work in this space. I've been in professional in Milwaukee. I originally grew up in Chicago, but I've been a professional in Milwaukee for about 30 years now, a professional in Wisconsin for about 30 years now. I've seen a lot from the standpoint of, I've been fortunate enough to work in environments that, and to work in very different environments, all kind of moving towards the same thing. I've been in the community relations, community affairs space all of my professional career, but I've had an opportunity to work in those spaces for both for-profit organizations, nonprofit organizations, Fortune 500 companies, membership organizations around neighborhood development, and then my position that I've been in for the last 3 years working in philanthropy. And working in those spaces has given me some really interesting context around the journey that we as society have been on as it relates to racial equity. We've been talking this game and we've been having these conversations since I've become a professional. We've been engaged in these spaces in one way, shape, or form, from starting from my first days out of college, thinking that I'm going to blaze a trail in a professional setting as being the only African-American in this space, and that 5 years from now, it's going to look so much different and look so much better because we will evolve as people. And what I've noticed in all of my diversity, equity, and inclusion work is that there have been different iterations of this over all this time. Conversations about populating people. Well, as long as we see people of different colors and different races in representation at or around tables, we're doing the necessary work that we need to be doing. Or watching leaders who weren't of color programming and developing nonprofit programs for people in communities and saying to themselves, well, we may not have any African Americans in our leadership, but we are helping the African American community by developing the programs that we are developing. Or working for a large Fortune 500 company who is looking at this triple bottom line, people, planet, profit type mindset, and thinking that equity work is really around supplier diversity and those types of areas that, while are very important, don't address the systemic issues that are happening in our communities. And so, and then even moving into the world of philanthropy, where philanthropy and nonprofit work have a ways to go relative to the type of work, the type of sourcing, the type of interest that we're putting into the communities, and how we are leveraging the talent that is in our communities to improve the lives of people that are working in those spaces. And so my equity journey, and even taking us today, which does feel different and feels like a new day because people are engaged. And I think people like me who have worked in spaces where I've been in customer service, where I've been rooted in customer service or relation type work, I've always worked in trying to create positive spaces for conversation. and creating opportunities for people to discuss in ways where they feel safe. And now that I move forward in my own professional journey and life cycle and racial equity journey, I'm realizing that that may not have been the best practice, that a better practice may have been to encourage a little bit tougher discussions, a little bit more exploration, maybe minimizing the comfort level to get at the real systemic issues that are happening in our community. And so I've been thinking a lot about what those changes look like today versus what they may have looked like a year ago or 2 years ago. And a lot of those changes, while happening in a global perspective, are also happening within me. And I think that's very important for me to look at, understand. I loved how Pastor Allen talked about self-care, and I've been engaged in a lot of conversations in this racial equity space. And one of the biggest and most consistent things that I'm hearing is, Tony, if you're going to lead racial equity conversations in philanthropy, you have to be well, you have to be whole, you have to be in a place where you can lead these conversations, so you have to take care of yourself. And so those ongoing conversations are all happening. And, you know, when we talk about influence, because of the professional work that I've done, obviously working with philanthropic organizations and having access to the leaders of those organizations, I have experienced, or I'm enjoying, some level of maybe not influence, but access to those individuals. When it comes down to leveraging that access to have influence, the best thing that I can do at this stage of my life and my own personal life and my own journey is to be authentic, to be a truth teller, and just to be honest. We've learned from our politics that honesty doesn't always feel like it's the best policy, but if we're going to be true to ourselves, we just got to be honest. And so I'm trying to live that truth within myself and within that work. One of the questions that you asked was, how can we influence leadership and management? I think we have to look at systems, and we have to look at the systemic approaches to addressing systemic racism. And we have to understand who those systems are and where those systems lie. Larger systems of government, obviously, is a big system. Business is a significant system. Philanthropy, where I work, is a system. And nonprofit organizations are also a system. When you look at the larger nonprofit organizations, who's making the decisions, who's sitting around the board table, who is actually driving the work that is happening in our communities, there's a systemic approach to how nonprofits are doing their work that is very similar to what's happening in philanthropy, as well as what is happening in business and what is happening in government. That is not to say that people don't have good hearts. That is not to say that people aren't coming trying to understand and believe what those solutions are, but systemic issues continue to permeate our communities and act like a cancer and put us in position where we end up taking 2 steps forward and 4 steps back all of the time. And so we have to really think about what that work looks like. So it becomes, how do you organize and engage your community and your neighborhood in this work? And that's where I think is the systemic shift. And I've been beating this drum since I've been working in for-profit sides, the corporate side, since I've been working in neighborhood development, and now in the spaces that I'm in philanthropy. And it goes directly to what Pastor Allen was talking about, and move very heavily into what Mr. Dillard was saying, in that this is the people business. That's it, plain and simple. We're the people business. We are getting up every day and supposed to be thinking about creating a better life and helping individuals create better lives for themselves inside of the people business. And our most important capital, just like what Pastor Allen said, is people. And systems have to recognize that it's the people that are affected by these decisions are the ones who should be able to be making the decisions about what is best for them. So if our larger systems, business, government, philanthropy, and nonprofit organizations aren't hitting the streets and aren't getting out and meeting with the people and having conversations with the people that are affected by the decisions and letting them influence what is best for them as community, you aren't doing the work. Plain and simple. You're not doing the necessary work. You might get up in the morning and feel like you're working, You might feel like you're doing something, but if you aren't meeting with the people that are affected, you ultimately aren't necessarily doing the work. So how can we support people in the movement? Philanthropy has been having more and deeper conversations about how to do that. A lot of philanthropic interests and organizations are looking at models within who they grant to and what they grant for. And they're thinking about advocacy platforms, and they're thinking about, and most importantly, they're thinking about leadership. So they're looking at succession planning and leaders for organizations that have traditionally not had leaders of color leading those organizations. And they're also looking at smaller organizations that can take their work to scale, that are led by people of color that can take that work to scale. That is an ongoing conversation that is happening. Many funders are investing in leadership development opportunities for people for organizations to increase and to deepen their benches as it relates to the work that is happening in those spaces, in those communities. Those conversations are continuing to happen. And then the final conversation, the final major question that really stuck out to me is, what can we offer people who want to work in this space, who want to be part of the solution and part of the work? Just come into it authentically. Just be yourself. Work within the greater good, and take on the principles of research, the principles of almost a Hippocratic oath, a medical oath, if you will. Do no harm. Go into communities and make the place better than it was when you showed up. Do no harm. Help be part of the solution. Help be part of that work. And as we're working in this racial equity space, we're in this moment in time. There are people that have been working in these spaces that have been internalizing this for decades, centuries. We've been internalizing this work. This isn't our first rodeo in racial equity, not our first time around the block, not our first time in this space. If you made a conscious decision to be part of this work because you were compelled to be part of this work because you watched the video in May of 2020, and now you're at the table, or you're at the meeting, or you're walking the pavement, or you're in the streets, don't leave. Stay. Stick around. Find out what more you can do. Find out what additional work you can do in the space. Be authentic, be present, and stick around, because we've watched waves of people come in before, and we've watched waves of people walk away. And so what is it that you're going to do is you're going forward to stay in this game, to stay in this work, to remain authentic in this work, and lift people up that are at the level that need to be lifted up, and help and do what you can to help them find their voice, do what you can to help them understand their value, and give them the opportunity to lead, not give them the opportunity to lead, nurture their opportunity to lead, because it is at this point that is those individuals that deserve to lead the effort, because everything that's happened up to this point isn't working, and we should blow it all up and think about how to do things differently.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I think you more than held your weight with the other panelists. So you don't need to worry about the fact that you thought you might have come in as a lightweight. You more than handled yourself well. Thank you so much, Tony, for your insight and your perspective. I would like now to introduce our Wisconsin State Representative, Sheila Stubbs, and really offer you the opportunity to give your insight. I mean, as we've been sort of foreshadowing, you've got a lot of experience on the ground in politics, and now you're at the next level. And so we're just really curious and interested in leaning in to hear what you have to share with us about what we need to be thinking about. So the floor is yours.
Oh my goodness, what an awesome panel. I'm so honored to be given this very distinct opportunity. And thank you, Annette Miller and Mary Beth Collins, for hosting and moderating this panel. It's an honor to be here with Pastor Dr. Reverend Marcus Allen, and you, Tony Shields of the Wisconsin Philanthropy Network, and Mr. Jerome Dillard, one of my colleagues that we've worked together. And we're still doing that work when it comes to justice. As the director of Expo, I am really, truly honored to be given this distinct opportunity. My name is Sheila Stubbs. I am a state representative. I represent the 77th Assembly District right here in Madison. It's comprised of the south and west parts of Madison, the village of Shorewood Hills, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I ran for office on August the 14th of 2018. On that date, I made history, being the first African-American to ever be elected to the state legislature from Dane County, breaking 170 years of history. Must I say, it's been a long time coming. So I absolutely have no time to waste. I'm so honored and grateful for everyone who's come before me, who have paved this road to give me the opportunity to vote, the opportunity to represent. I am also a Dane County Board Supervisor. I've been in this capacity for 15 years. I represent District 23, which is South Madison. So I find myself in such a unique opportunity to represent people at two levels of government. Must I say, the way that I actually got started in this work is my mom, Linda Hoskin, who is a diehard for the NAACP. I grew up in a house with unions, and I grew up in a house with civil rights and social justice. And one night, my mother was watching TV. We were residing in Beloit, Wisconsin, just 45 minutes from here. And she saw television and saw this community called Simpson Street on TV, and they called it the notorious Simpson Street. And so many of you know there's nothing good that come out of the word notorious. And so my mother said to me, I want to go and I want to move there. So while people were moving out of this community, guess what? Here's my mother moving in. And my mother challenged me. She said, you know what? You're not going to talk about how bad it is in the neighborhood. You're going to roll up your sleeves and you're going to go to work. So I moved into the very neighborhood that it was drugs, it was crime, it was gang activity. I was, yes, a probation parole agent in the daytime. And at night, I was a volunteer. I was working with mothers, teaching them how to read. I was volunteering and giving people food. I was paying people's rent. Guess what I was doing? I was community. I was loving the very community that the newspaper threw away, where people didn't want to come into South Madison. People didn't want to drive down Simpson Street. They talked about Simpson Street, but they didn't come to do the work in Simpson Street. So the first factor that I want to share with you is it's called work. You got to go do something in a community in order to get some positive out of that. And because of that, that's how I met Annette at the time, working as a deputy mayor with the mayor here in Madison, and knowing how bad it was in South Madison. But guess what? I never gave up on South Madison, because South Madison never gave up on me. And with that being said, today, just right now, today is a very challenging time in our community. When we look at what's happening nationally, we saw an election that left our country, yes, our beloved country, more divided than ever we've seen in our lifetime, where we've seen where it's a red state or a blue state. But I heard Joe Biden said, I'm representing the United States of America. For far too long, we've been divided, but it's been that one word that's been very hard to talk about in our society. It's called race. We had that conversation in my house, but our country wasn't having a conversation when my house was having the conversation. So let's talk about across our state. We continue to see lives lost and families forever impacted by COVID-19 and the rapidness that is happening. Even seeing right now how Governor Evers today just given another executive order mandating masking. Right now, it's really bad in the state of Wisconsin. We make history, but let's not make history because we have had the highest deaths. We're growing so fast with COVID-19. We know how COVID is not just impacting people, but Black and brown people at a higher rate. Systemic racism continues to perpetuate racial disparities. Let's talk about the state of Wisconsin being the worst state to raise a Black family, but yet I'm here with my Black husband and my Black daughter and in a community that I so love. Why is it that people can find it okay to see that we have a top 10 university down the street in Madison, Wisconsin, that can solve problems all over the world, but we cannot, in little Madison, Wisconsin, solve our own problems of racial disparities. We know it, and we keep seeing people of color walk away from success and prosperity. We see in Madison there's been a tale of two cities, you know, the tale of the have and the tale of the have-nots, and we have had many problems ahead of us, and I think all is for coming for today, that we have to learn how we can create a better tomorrow. I want a better tomorrow. That's why, in fact, when I give a statistic about how bad it is, you're also going to see me talk about what I'm doing to make it better and a more livable community here in Madison, Wisconsin, because you know what? My family is here and I want it to be better. You know, when I was first elected as a state representative, it didn't come to my mind that I would be making history, but I knew, in fact, I needed to get to the state capitol. Why? Because it was things that wasn't happening that I knew as a local elected official needed to happen. So instead of sitting around talking about how bad it is and who's representing me, I got up and I did something about it. Not only did I run for a county board and ran against a two-term incumbent and beat him, I got up and I ran for state representative, ran against 3 people and won by nearly 50% in Madison, Wisconsin. See, I'm about getting up and doing something. I'm not just going to tell you how bad it is. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing to do what? Reform where I am. And I understand that I can make history. But let me tell you about the present history. You know, I need to know where I'm coming from, which is important. I got to know the history in order for me to know how am I going to change what's happening. In fact, when I ran for state representative, I was given the name Game Changer. And I said, why did they call me the Game Changer? They said, because now that you have arrived at the state capitol, things have got to change. And let me share that with you. It has got to change. In fact, while I've been here within a year and a half, I've also earned the name the People's Representative, because I don't forget where I come from. And Mr. Dillard knows firsthand, whenever you're in the Capitol, you are welcome to my doors, because I'm going to get up and I'm going to make sure that I represent you. And that's what we have lost for way too long. People are sitting in that Capitol. They don't speak our values. They don't speak our belief systems, but yet they're sitting in those seats and they're sitting there 30, 40, 50 years. And we are getting further behind, and behind meaning people of color. We're not gaining anything. So instead of sitting around and allowing people that is not representing you to represent you, get up and do something about it. And that's what I did. And so when I go in to the state capitol building, I'm ready to have the most uncomfortable conversations. I remember my first conversation with Speaker Voss. It wasn't a conversation that I invited myself to. It was a conversation about a resolution that the Black Caucus had put together that was including Colin Kaepernick name. And the Republicans had a problem with his name because he kneeled, and they said, oh, during the national anthem, he kneeled. And I said, as a freshman legislator, for the first time sitting at the table, I said, you don't get a chance to tell me who is my history. You don't get a chance to tell me as an African American who I can recognize and who should be in my resolution. And let me tell you something. I could say that directly because I knew who put me in the Capitol. I knew my district put me there, but most importantly, it was God. It was God that sealed my deal. So he equipped me to go in the Capitol and say what I needed to say on behalf of the people. In fact, as I talked to pastors within the community, they told me that I remind them of Esther, that I have access to the governor. So my people have got to get liberated because I have the access to do what needs to be done. In fact, while I got there, I've been known to create pathways for people of color. I make no apologies today for who I am. I make no apologies today for what I believe in. In fact, as a freshman legislator, I learned first, and I was given the order to create change. I got to work on day one. You know why? Because it took 170 years for me to land in that state capitol. I had no time to waste. In fact, my very first term, I introduced some really important legislation. I'll identify a couple of pieces of legislation. The first piece of legislation that was my passion that I introduced was to end racial disparities in the state of Wisconsin. This legislation was drafted as a result of my incident on August the 7th, 2018, which is a racial profile incident. Many of you have heard me talk about it, that I was out knocking on doors on the west side of Madison in a predominantly white community with my 71-year-old mother and my 8-year-old daughter when someone called the police on me because they thought that I was a drug dealer at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, knocking on doors, trying to buy drugs from the local drug store and the dealer. So my point is, I had to GPS to the neighborhood because I didn't even know where it was. But in fact, it wasn't just that incident that was triggered. It was also my counter that I had with the police officer. When I was talking to this future constituent, a police officer pulled up behind my car. When I talked with her and asked her what was wrong, she asked me, what was I doing in that neighborhood? Remember, I told you it was 2018. Why was I on the west side of Madison knocking on doors on a Saturday? Had not been in the community more than 20 minutes. Why was I there? I began to show her my name tag that said Sheila Stubbs for State Assembly, but that wasn't enough. I showed her my campaign lit with a photo of former County Executive Kathleen Falk and myself. She still didn't believe that was me. I had to, in 2018, show her my driver's license. What happens if I didn't have that driver's license? Not only that, she said, you're knocking on doors in this neighborhood. How do you know what doors to knock on? I had to, in 2018, show her a walk list. In 2018, we know that there are problems with racism that exist right in the state of Wisconsin. Matter of fact, let me get closer to the picture. Right here in Madison, Wisconsin, exactly right here on the west side of Madison. So we don't need to look all around the United States when we can look right back at home. But again, why is it we can't figure out how to adequately address racism when in fact we have a top 10 university down the street? And so one of the things I wanted to do was to introduce this legislation to end racial profiling, and I did. And it did not pass the legislature because I could not get one Republican to believe that profiling exists in the state of Wisconsin. But we get a chance. Thank God I'm coming back for the next session, so I will be reintroducing that again. The second piece of legislation that I introduced was for priorities of minority health grants. We know that infant mortality rates is the worst, and when Wisconsin has the worst infant mortality rate, maternity rate, and early child care. And so I wanted to make sure we have to be direct. We have to be insistent upon where we have to prioritize our dollars. So I introduced a priority grant for minority health grant. And guess what? I could not get one Republican to join me. So guess what? The legislation is just sitting. Here's the next piece of legislation I introduced, and I thought I was doing a great job. Creating a community restorative court that focuses on 17 to 25-year-olds right here in Dane County is where I started it, but I was introducing it at the state level. So across the state of Wisconsin, I was able to get the Governor Evers to join me with that effort, and it is bipartisan. But it didn't pass the legislation. We actually have to focus on how do we get our young people out of this system. We know once you are part of Department of Correction, it is a vacuum cleaner. The criminal justice system just sucks you up and it pulls you and your family. And how do we give people a better path and an approach to the criminal justice system with the restorative justice approach? So that particular bill is out there. But one of my biggest accomplishments was partner with Governor Tony Evers to create, yes, the Office of Equity and Inclusion and the Council for Equity and Inclusion to ensure that our state is committed to serving everyone, no matter their background, and addressing the urgent crisis. Yes, it is a crisis. Yes, it is a call and action. Exactly. It is an emergency on racial disparities in the state of Wisconsin. And let me be the first one to tell you, it can't just be a person of color problem. It has to be my white colleague problems. It has to be a rural problem. It can't just be an urban problem. So because I am a state legislator, it needs to be every legislator and every senator problem across the state. And so Governor Tony Evers signed an executive order codifying the existence of this bill. I was able to get every Democrat, every senator, and every state representative to sign on to this bill. But let me share with you as of today, the bill is still sitting because it cannot even get a hearing. This is how bad it is in our state capitol. We are at a place, and Mr. Dillard said it best, we've got to change some seats. We got to get people that could not vote access to voting, unlock the vote. I signed on to that bill because it is the right thing to do. Let's be consistent and determined and give me the respect of my colleagues across the state and across the aisle. One of the important pieces of work that I'm doing right now, because I think it's important that I don't just go to that state capitol, but you need to know what I'm doing. And I'm honored to share that with you today as a co-chair for the Speaker's Task Force on Racial Disparities. One of the task force members spoke earlier today. Dr. Allen is on that task force where we're focusing on law enforcement. It's a bipartisan effort to comprise of community leaders. It has activists, it has members of faith-based, we have public health professionals, experts in education and law enforcement. We are coming together across the state of Wisconsin to bring community voices to the table. Here's my comment. If you're not at the table, you are on the menu. And if you are on the menu, you are subject to change. And your change is going to come whether you're prepared or not. And so I believe in bringing community to the table. And I believe that when community is at the table, community don't need someone to speak for them. Community can speak well about what it is that needs to happen. And I'm so honored to say that we have community a part of the Speaker's Task Force on Racial Disparities. But let me say, I do not do this work alone. I rely on the voices of our community leaders, our activists, our experts, our professionals, my constituents. I'm so honored that the constituents of the 77th Assembly District saw fit to send me back to the Capitol. I didn't have anyone run against me because my record speaks for itself. But let me tell you something else about change. When Governor Evers called for a special session on police reform, it was not just me outside of the Capitol advocating for change. I asked community, the ones that are out there on the streets, these groups that are out there advocating, asking us to please listen to them, giving us demands. I said, you know what? I'm inviting you to your Capitol. You need to come and tell us what we need to do as lawmakers because we're not listening. So I was able to get community to come to the state Capitol on August the 31st and speak out loud and clear and talk about exactly what we needed to do and how to hold us, yes, legislators accountable for what needs to be done. They were very, very successful at what they did. But we all have a duty to make our community a better place. And we all have to do it, and we all have to make it happen. Our unique experiences, our backgrounds, and point of views that make up our neighborhoods makes it a better place. No matter who you are, there's a place for you at the table as a decision-making, as a person who serves on a committee. You deserve to have a place at the table. In fact, the Reverend Jesse Jackson has said, when everyone is included, everyone wins. When you are engaged with your neighbors, like I've been, with your local government, with your local organizations, you are working to make the lives of people closest to you better. People don't want someone representing them when they're not feeling like they're getting progress. In our conversations with neighbors, I discuss really hard conversations. I find out what the problems are. I'm one that believes less talk, more action, because a lot of elected officials, we get to microphones and we talk. But we don't get anything done. And so I believe whenever I put a microphone in my hand, you should hold me accountable. If I give you a problem, I better be working on a solution. And as I began to close out on some of my comments here, there are many things that we can do when we come together. and make real change in our community. I am encouraged by all of you who attended today. I am encouraged that we can make Madison a better place when we are part of the engagement. It's also important to remember that community change takes community action. It's vital that you meet with your neighbors, you continue to create those connections, that you create networks, you continue to organize, to engage, and listen. Listening is the most effective key of communication. I listen often. Sometimes I go to a meeting, I don't say a word. I need to hear what has been asked of me, and then I need to hear what they're telling me to do. And so one of the things I did is I got out in the streets, and yes, I peacefully protested. Yes, I did it multiple times because I needed to listen to what the people were demanding. Yes, I've gotten a demand letter. Yes, they needed to say some of the things they needed to say. Yes, people are tired of task force and strategic meetings. Folks want to see you get something done. And so I've been called to action. And in the words of the late U.S. Congressman John Lewis once said, ours is not the struggle of one day, 1 week, or 1 year. Ours is not the struggle of one judicial appointment or presidential term. Ours is the struggle of a lifetime, or maybe even many lifetimes. And each one of us in every generation must do our part. Today is a wonderful opportunity to ask any of us on this panel how to be better engaged. Please feel free to reach out to me in my office. I'm State Representative Sheila Stubbs. My email address is rep.stubbs@legis.gov. Please feel free to reach out to my office for information. If you want to be connected, if you want to go out on Facebook, like me on Facebook, like me on Twitter. I'm accessible. I'm in the community. I'm a pastor. I'm a county board supervisor. What I am is I'm a servant. That is the best position to have. So I thank you so much again, Annette and Mary, for giving me this opportunity. And I believe we can create a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Stubbs. There were so many times I just wanted to gracefully jump in so we could get into the Q&A. So, the reality is that there never is enough time for this important work. And I think you're making that very apparent to all of us. And I think all of the panelists have made that really apparent to us, that there's much trouble to do and to make, right? There's a lot to do for all of us. And I really appreciate the ways in which all of you really approached the questions that were put in front of you. Number one, just to summarize, we need people in this work. There's a lot to do. There's much to be done, and we need people coming into this space with willing hands and open hearts to do this work. And as was also mentioned, stay in the space. This isn't a moment, this is a movement, right? And so that means we've got to lean in and stay in, even when you're uncomfortable, even when it's tough. One person who said in the chat, I'm a peaceful person, I'm a peacemaker. We need peacemakers, we need troublemakers, we need disruptors, we need all kinds of people. There is something for everyone. But what we need most importantly is we need people, and we need people to stay in the movement. And the other big thing is you got to do the work, right? This isn't going to happen if we don't do the work. So let's get to a couple questions. One of the questions that came up is, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to do this easily, but the question came up about political campaigns and people of color, canvassing and going out into the neighborhoods and the streets and knocking on doors. Are there some suggestions about how they can do that safely, right? Knowing that some of these neighborhoods are predominantly white, and especially in this time and space when people may be bearing arms, right? So do you have, this question was specifically addressed to you, Representative Stubbs. If you could briefly respond to that, and then if any of our other panelists might have something that they might want to offer up about this question, that'd be great too.
Thank you for that question. First and foremost, I recognize that I'm an African American, so my experience at doors and my entire political experience has been different than my colleagues that have been white. Many times they did not believe it. So one of the things that I've done, I've never knocked doors by myself. I've always taken someone with me. But my colleagues who did not believe that I was treated differently, I asked them to knock doors with me. And some of the experience would be like, no matter how many jobs I had, I would have a white male say, I'm not going to vote for you. You don't have a job. Or when it's time to knock on a door and there's a fence, I won't open the fence. I stay outside the fence. My white colleagues would open the fence and go into the door. I was just very, very concern about how far distance I would have with opening fences, opening doors, but I just don't do doors alone. Even after my incident, I've only knocked doors in South Madison. That's my comfort, but I'm really not good knocking doors for someone because people that know my story, when I knock at their doors, they try to keep me there for their story. Ex-Colleen Care, I knocked doors for him and Gloria Reyes, and they realized I was just not the right person for the door. So I would always say, never knock on doors by yourself. And I don't do doors at night.
Anyone else want to offer any advice or perspective about that question at all? Okay. All right. Another question that I have is that when thinking about supporting our Black and Brown and Indigenous community members, what do you think is most critical in offering that support, especially when we think about racial equity and social justice?
One thing I'd say is don't confuse support with giving empowerment. Oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this too, you think you're empowering people and giving them permission to lead, and that should not be any quantitative role. We need to listen, and we need to be led, and to be led in the direction of the needs of the people that are impacted by that work. So I think we need to get out of the best practice business and get more into the learning and understanding business, and learn and listen and hear. I think is the best mode of support for anyone that is working in this space.
So well said, Tony. I subscribe to the philosophy that those closest to the problems are closest to the solutions. And I use an example of some of our colleagues who are taking on immigration. You know, we're there to support them, but not to be part of that leadership, and to listen to them. Criminal justice, I feel that directly impacted people should lead the cause of criminal justice. But we have so many who feel that they're helping, but pretty much getting in the way because they want to lead. They want to lead, and that's their comfort zone. Well said, Tony. I'll say that again.
Great. Another question that we have is, when you think about your own personal actions and how you've had your own journey about how you're lifting up the Black and Brown community, what has been most insightful? Because I think that people think that we as people of color don't have practice and work to do ourselves, right? And I'm just acknowledging and recognizing that this panel is made up of Black and Brown people here with us tonight. And so I'm just curious, like, what kind of insight in your own personal journey has emerged for you as you think about this work? And what would you offer as advice to other Black and Brown people who are doing this work too?
I would personally say that I have work to do. I would say that I'm a work in progress, and I need to be mindful of and think about what actions that I take on a regular basis to perpetuate white leadership myth or white leadership or white colonialism thoughts that I've bought into over the course of my lifetime that are holding us back. And when I'm doing that, and try to be mindful of when I'm about to do it or when I've done it over my lifetime, and also within my own journey, not being afraid to be harder on myself than I need to be, than I have been over the course of most of my lifetime.
Others?
Well, insight that I continue to learn about others is, no, all Black people are not poor. Right. It's Black people that live in suburbans that people say Democrats trying to take away your suburban areas. It's a lot of affluent African Americans in Madison, more than I've ever seen before in my life. Very affluent scientists and CEOs, and so it learned that one, and then also the perseverance of our people, the willpower to keep going in the midst of all that they're enduring, and trying to put things together. I'm a product of a single family household, and I'm just now realizing, and I'm gonna go and say it, the importance of the Black woman and how much Black women have contributed to this nation by raising young Black males the best they can by themselves. And that is something that I'm acknowledging totally, and it doesn't get said enough, how Black women are leading the way, and if they're not leading the way, they put something in a young Black man to help him lead the way. Even Barack Obama.
Wow, you kind of took me by surprise there too. Thank you. I appreciate everyone's authenticity. That's what makes this series so important and so special, is that we're really leading with our whole person. Jerome, was there anything that you wanted to add to that conversation? Sheila?
Thank you, Dr. Allen, for recognizing how strong Black women are. You know, it was Black women in 2018 that changed the landscape of Congress because we went to the ballot. We know Black women are the ones in the household who are really making sure elections take place. And for far too long, Black women have never been given the place that we deserve in our communities. And oftentimes, our families become divided. We are strong women. We are natural nurturers, and get us in a room and we can get the job done. I don't care what room we go in. We are strong. We are determined. We've had a lot of barriers that we've had to overcome, and we don't forget where we come from. And so on today, I'm just honored. I am so honored to say that I stand on the shoulders of strong Black women. I don't even understand how they got over some scenarios or some situations, but what I do know is there is a God that kept them on the straight and narrow. Hallelujah. I feel you, Pastor Allen. Yes, sir.
There's been a lot of preaching tonight on a lot of different levels, and we need it, right? We need it. So unfortunately, we are so at time. It's so hard to stop. But I'm really glad that we had the good fortune to have all of you with us tonight. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your insight, your vulnerability, your whole personness. Each and every one of you lit it on fire tonight. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Mary Beth to close us out.
Yes, thank you all so much. I won't keep us here very long. Just wanted to make sure we expressed our gratitude from the Center for Community and Nonprofit Studies for these amazing experts. And this is the kind of expertise we really need in this journey. So thanks again. We can't say it enough. And also just to let you all know that next week, Tuesday, we have the final of this fall series, the final session of this fall series, again at 4 p.m. Facebook Live. You can check it out on the Center for Community and Nonprofit Studies Facebook page. the 24th at 4 p.m. And then we will be in touch via our Facebook page and other channels about how you can access this full series later. Please be in touch with our center and Equity by Design and the Mortgage Center for Public Service. If you enjoyed this, we want to keep this journey going in other ways as well, and we'd love to hear from you. And if you want to see the names and organizations of our presenters today so that you can follow up with them, the last Facebook post about this event, I think, has all that information. And I feel like I know these folks on this panel well enough that I can say that they would be happy to hear from you. So thank you all so much. Stay engaged and stay safe and well. And thanks again, everybody.